My name is Jasmine Reed, and I am 29 years old. I used to think humiliation had to be loud to destroy you, but that night, it came wrapped in a smile across a family dinner table. My brother leaned back like he had been waiting his whole life for that moment, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "You don't deserve to carry our last name." Nobody laughed. That was the worst part. My mother gave a small nod, like he had finally said something everyone had been thinking. My father lowered his eyes to his plate, pretending the silverware was more important than his daughter being erased in front of the entire family. For a few seconds, the room felt frozen. Everyone watched me the way people watch glass hit the floor, waiting for the crack. I could feel my face getting warm, but I refused to give him the breakdown he wanted. He kept smirking, proud of himself, certain he had just put me back in the place he believed I belonged. Then the chair at the head of the table scraped against the floor. My grandfather slowly stood up. He did not raise his voice. He did not look angry. Somehow, that made everyone even quieter. He looked at my brother and said, "Then she'll carry mine, and everything that comes with it." My brother's smile disappeared so fast it almost looked painful. His hand tightened around his glass. "No," he whispered. "Grandpa, you can't do this to me." And that was when I realized this dinner had never really been about my last name. It was about a secret decision my family thought had already been made. Before I tell you what he meant, tell me, what is the weather like where you are right now? And does it match your mood today? Also, where are you watching from? I want to know how far this story travels. To understand why those words cut so deep, you have to understand what the Calloway name meant in my family. I grew up as Jasmine Reed, with my father's last name, but the name everyone respected was my mother's side, Calloway. My grandfather, Theodore Calloway, built that name from nothing. He started with one failing repair shop near the river, 2 borrowed machines, and a reputation for showing up when nobody else would. Over time, that little shop became Callaway Works, a company that repaired water pumps, floodgates, and emergency drainage systems across the city. Later, Grandpa turned part of the old building into a training workshop for young people who could not afford college, but wanted a real skill and a second chance. In our city, the Callaway name did not mean luxury. It meant reliability. It meant someone would answer the phone in a storm. But inside my family, that meaning slowly twisted into status. My mother, Marlene, loved the respect that came with being a Calloway. My father, Paul, had married into that world and survived by agreeing with whoever sounded most powerful. And my brother, Damon, learned early that if he spoke loudly enough, smiled confidently enough, and wore an expensive watch while doing it, people would mistake him for the future. Damon was 31, 2 years older than me, and my mother treated him like he had been born carrying a crown. He worked in high-end real estate, selling luxury apartments and riverfront properties to people who liked the idea of a neighborhood more than the people already living there. Every deal he closed became a family announcement. Every photo of him in a suit became proof that he was going places. Every time he talked over someone, my mother called it confidence. Every time I stayed calm, she called it weakness. I became a civil engineer for the city, working on stormwater planning and flood prevention. My job was not glamorous. I spent my days studying drainage maps, old pipes, neighborhood risk reports, and emergency systems people only noticed when they failed. Grandpa understood that. He was the only one who asked real questions. He asked what systems were aging, which neighborhoods needed help, how many families could be protected by one good decision made early. When I answered, he listened like my words had weight. At home, my mother would smile vaguely and say, "That sounds nice, honey," then ask Damon about his latest closing. My father would nod without looking up. Damon would laugh and call me the pipe girl, like keeping a city from flooding was a hobby. For years, I told myself it did not matter. People do not need applause to do meaningful work. But there is a special kind of ache that comes from being useful to strangers and invisible to your own family. Grandpa used to say, "A name is not a trophy, Jasmine. It is a promise." I did not know then that he was watching, measuring, waiting to see who understood the difference between carrying a name and cashing it in. Damon thought the answer had to be him. My mother thought so too. My father never said it, but his silence leaned in Damon's direction. Then, a few weeks before Grandpa's 82nd birthday dinner, Damon said something at Sunday lunch that made the whole table laugh, except Grandpa and me. He lifted his glass, smirked, and said, "Grandpa built the Callaway name, but I'm the one who can finally sell it for what it's worth." My mother laughed like he had said something brilliant. My father smiled into his coffee. Grandpa did not laugh. He only stared at Damon, calm and unreadable. That was the first time I felt the ground shift under the family. I thought Damon was only arrogant. I had no idea he had already started turning Grandpa's legacy into a deal. 3 weeks before Grandpa's birthday dinner, the family group chat started feeling less like planning and more like a stage Damon had built for himself. My mother told everyone to keep the evening open because Grandpa's 82nd birthday would be very special this year. She added that we should dress nicely, arrive on time, and avoid unnecessary drama. In my family, avoid drama usually meant do not make Damon face consequences. A few minutes later, Damon replied with a photo of himself standing beside a man in a tailored navy suit outside a glass office tower. His caption said, "Big things coming for the Callaway name." My stomach tightened. Damon had never cared about the Callaway workshop. He did not volunteer there. He did not know the apprentices by name. He had once complained that the old building smelled like oil and rainwater. But he cared deeply about land, especially land near the river that developers had been circling for years. 2 days later, my father called during my lunch break. His voice was careful, the way it got when he wanted me to accept something unfair. He said, "Your brother has been working on a proposal. Your mother is very excited. I just want you to promise you won't make things uncomfortable at dinner." I asked what kind of proposal. He sighed and said, "It's about modernizing the family assets." That was Damon's language. Not protecting the workshop, not expanding the training fund, modernizing assets. I asked if Grandpa had approved it. My father paused too long. Then he said, "Just be supportive, Jasmine. This could be good for everyone." After the call, I stared at a flood risk map, but all I could think about was the old Callaway building. The workshop sat on valuable riverfront property. Developers wanted it because the area had changed. Warehouses became restaurants. Repair shops became boutique gyms. Families who had lived there for decades were being priced out one renovated block at a time. I knew the pattern. When people called a neighborhood underused, it usually meant they had stopped seeing the people using it. That night, Damon emailed the family a glossy presentation called "A Future Worthy of the Callaway Legacy." The first page showed luxury condos with rooftop gardens, glass balconies, and private parking. The old workshop was gone. The training space was gone. The courtyard where apprentices practiced welding was replaced by a cafe for residents. Damon called the plan a bold transformation. He called the workshop emotionally significant but financially inefficient. He called the apprenticeship fund a legacy brand opportunity. Not a promise, not a responsibility, a brand. The deeper I read, the worse it got. Damon wanted to sell the land to a developer and negotiate a consulting fee for himself. He proposed using the Callaway name in the building's marketing. He suggested turning the apprenticeship program into a small scholarship with a photo wall in the lobby, something wealthy residents could admire without ever meeting the kids whose futures had been taken from them. By the last page, my hands were shaking. There was a projected payout for family members, including my mother and father. My name was not listed, but I was too angry about the apprentices to care. The next morning, I called Luis, a former student from the workshop who now ran emergency pump maintenance for 2 hospitals. He told me rumors had already started. A developer had toured the block. Someone had asked about clearing the training equipment before spring. Before we hung up, Luis got quiet and said, "Jasmine, that place saved my life. Please don't let them turn it into a lobby decoration." That was when I stopped thinking like the daughter nobody listened to and started thinking like the engineer Grandpa respected. I pulled public records, tax documents, trust language, flood zone reports, and grant conditions tied to the program. By the end of the week, I had a 12-page analysis showing what Damon's proposal would cost in legal risk, public trust, community damage, and broken commitments. I did not send it to the family chat. Damon would have turned it into a performance. My mother would have called me jealous. My father would have asked why I could not let people be happy. Instead, I sent it directly to Grandpa with one sentence. "I am not trying to interfere, but I think you should see what this plan would really do." He replied 4 hours later. "Thank you. I needed facts, not noise." For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. But Damon was moving like a man who had already won. He ordered a new suit. He hired a photographer. He told cousins he was preparing to step up for the family. My mother told everyone Grandpa was finally ready to recognize leadership. Nobody said Damon's name directly, but they did not have to. By the time I walked into that dinner, I was no longer afraid of being ignored. I was afraid of what Damon would destroy if nobody stopped him. Grandpa's birthday dinner was held at a restaurant built inside the original Callaway repair shop, the same brick building where he had once worked 16-hour days with grease under his fingernails and unpaid invoices in his notebook. The owners had kept pieces of the old place on purpose. Iron beams crossed the ceiling. Black and white photos lined the walls. In one photo, Grandpa stood beside 3 teenage apprentices, all holding tools, all grinning like someone had just handed them a future. I arrived 10 minutes early with a simple gift bag in one hand and a folder tucked inside my coat. I had promised myself I would not use that folder unless I had to. I did not want to ruin Grandpa's birthday. I did not want to fight in front of relatives, donors, old employees, and people connected to the foundation. But the closer I got to the private dining room, the more I understood this was not a normal birthday dinner. There were place cards, printed menus, 2 long tables arranged like a boardroom pretending to be a family gathering. At the far end, beside Grandpa's seat, sat our family attorney, Mr. Bell, who had handled Callaway documents since before I was born. Lawyers do not attend birthday dinners for cake. My mother saw me first. She wore pearls and the smile she used when strangers were watching. "Jasmine, you made it," she said, like my arrival was a minor detail. Before I could answer, Damon walked in behind me and the room shifted toward him. My mother's whole face brightened. She fixed his collar and said, "There he is, the future of this family." Damon laughed softly, pretending to be embarrassed, but he glanced at me to make sure I had heard. He looked polished, expensive, and completely sure of himself. My father stood near the bar, holding a glass of water he was not drinking. He gave me a quick nod, then looked away. That was his specialty. Almost kindness, almost courage, almost fatherhood. I moved toward the table and noticed an open seat near Grandpa. For half a second, I thought maybe it was mine. Then my mother touched my arm and said, "Oh, sweetheart, you're over here." She guided me to a chair halfway down the table, between a distant cousin and one of my father's golf friends. Damon took the seat beside Grandpa like it had always belonged to him. Grandpa had not arrived yet. That mattered. Damon was arranging the scene before the judge entered the room. While guests mingled, Damon moved from person to person, shaking hands and speaking in polished phrases. Vision, growth, opportunity, legacy. He used the Callaway name like a key he had stolen and was testing in every lock. I heard him tell one of Grandpa's old business friends that the workshop was underperforming land. I heard him tell a donor that younger leadership could repackage the mission. I heard him tell a developer-looking man near the doorway that the family was emotionally attached but ready. Ready for what? I wanted to ask. Ready to erase 60 years of work? Ready to sell the place where kids learn to build instead of disappear? Instead, I stood near the wall and reminded myself that timing mattered. If I spoke too soon, Damon would make me look bitter. If I spoke too emotionally, my mother would call me sensitive. If I spoke without proof, my father would stare at the floor and let the room decide I was jealous. Then Damon came up beside me with a glass of sparkling water in his hand. He watched the room, pleased with himself, then leaned close enough that only I could hear him. Try not to bring up pipes, permits, or poor people tonight. Grandpa deserves ambition. Something cold moved through me. I knew Damon could be cruel, but what stunned me was how comfortable he sounded. Like compassion was embarrassing. Like the people Grandpa had spent his life helping were dirty details that might ruin Damon's moment. I turned to him slowly, ready to answer, but then I saw Grandpa in the doorway. He had heard enough. I could tell by his face. Not angry, exactly. Still. Deeply still. Damon did not notice. He was too busy smiling at his own reflection in the windows. Grandpa walked in, and the room softened around him. People greeted him with real respect, the kind earned over decades. He hugged my mother, shook my father's hand, accepted Damon's loud birthday greeting, and then looked across the room at me. For 1 second, his eyes held mine. I do not know what he saw in my face, but I know what I felt in his. Patience, warning, maybe sorrow. Dinner began with polite smiles and careful laughter, but Damon had never been good at hiding contempt once he believed he had already won. The first course had barely been served before Damon began performing. He did not have conversations that night. He held court. Every topic became a doorway back to him. If someone mentioned the city's riverfront, Damon talked about property values. If someone mentioned Grandpa's old repair contracts, Damon talked about expansion. If someone mentioned the apprenticeship program, Damon smiled like he was tolerating an adorable family tradition and said, "Of course, the mission matters, but every mission needs a modern model." My mother looked at him like he was delivering wisdom from the mountain. "Damon understands how the world works," she said, loud enough for the table to hear. My father smiled weakly and took another sip of water. I watched Grandpa more than Damon. Grandpa ate slowly, listened closely, and said almost nothing. That silence made Damon bolder. He mistook it for approval. About 20 minutes into dinner, one of Grandpa's old friends, Mr. Alvarez, turned to me and asked about a stormwater project I had helped manage on the east side. For once, the table near me quieted enough for me to answer. I explained that the neighborhood had flooded 3 times in 5 years, and that the new pump schedule and drainage redesign had helped protect almost 200 homes during the last heavy storm. I was not bragging. I was just answering. But Damon laughed before I finished. "That's cute," he said, leaning back. "But I think tonight is more about real money, not city maintenance." The words landed hard. A few people gave uncomfortable smiles. Mr. Alvarez's expression cooled. My mother gave me a warning look, as if I had been rude. I set my fork down and said nothing. Damon loved silence when he thought it meant surrender. He described his proposal, though nobody had officially asked him to. He talked about the riverfront property like he had discovered it himself, not like Grandpa had spent half his life saving it from creditors, floods, and developers. Damon called the land undervalued. He called the workshop symbolic. He called the apprentices a beautiful part of the story. That phrase made my stomach turn. A story is something you tell. Those apprentices were people. Some had records. Some had aged out of foster care. Some were supporting younger siblings. Some had been told their whole lives they would never be useful to anyone. Callaway Works gave them skills, paychecks, references, and pride. Damon reduced them to decoration. I glanced toward the serving station and saw Luis standing with two former apprentices who had helped cater the event as a favor to Grandpa. His jaw was tight. He had heard everything. I finally spoke. What happens to the apprentices if the workshop closes? Damon turned his head slowly like I had interrupted a wedding speech. They adapt, he said. Successful people always do. The room changed after that. No one shouted. No one slammed the table. But something shifted. Mr. Alvarez looked down. One cousin stopped smiling. The developer near the end of the table glanced toward Grandpa, maybe wondering if Damon had said too much. My mother rushed in to soften it, but she only made it worse. Jasmine, tonight is not the time for your little causes, she said. This is about your grandfather's legacy. I looked at her and felt something old inside me loosen. For years, I had tried to make her understand me gently. I had explained my work, minimized my hurt, swallowed little humiliations, and accepted half apologies. But hearing her call human futures my little causes made me realize she had understood enough. She simply valued Damon's ambition more. Damon smiled again, reassured by her support. He lifted his glass and said, "Look, change makes some people uncomfortable, but not everyone is built to carry a family forward. Some people maintain things, other people lead." My mother nodded. My father stared at his plate. Grandpa's eyes stayed on Damon. Damon kept going, enjoying himself. He said the Callaway name needed someone visible, someone with relationships, someone who could walk into a room and command respect. He said the family had been too sentimental for too long. Every sentence sounded polished, but underneath it, I heard the message he had given me my whole life. You are small. You are boring. You are in the way. I could have pulled out my folder then. I could have corrected his numbers, exposed his consulting fee, explained the grant restrictions, and shown everyone how little he understood about the trust he wanted to control. But Grandpa had not moved. Because he had always treated patience like strength, I waited. Dessert arrived. Candles were brought out for Grandpa, and everyone sang with forced cheerfulness. Damon sang the loudest. When the plates were cleared, Mr. Bell placed a gray envelope beside Grandpa's coffee cup. Damon noticed it too. His posture changed. He straightened his jacket, smoothed his tie, and looked around as if preparing for applause. My mother's eyes shone with expectation. My father looked pale. Grandpa folded his hands and said, "Before I say anything, I'd like to hear what Damon believes the Callaway name means." That was the invitation Damon had been waiting for. He stood, thanked Grandpa, thanked the family, and talked about honor, future, and difficult decisions. Then his gaze slid toward me, and the warmth drained from his voice. "Of course," he said, "some people are attached to the past because the past is the only place they feel important." I felt the table tense. He smiled. "Some people hide behind quiet work and call it character. But a family name like ours deserves more than someone who fixes drains and writes reports." My mother did not stop him. My father did not stop him. Grandpa did not stop him. Damon took their silence as permission. Then he finally said the sentence he had been circling all night, and the room went so quiet I could hear my own pulse. Damon looked directly at me, his smile sharp with satisfaction, and said, "Jasmine, you don't deserve to carry our last name." For a moment, nobody breathed. Even the servers near the doorway froze. My mother gave a small nod, quick but unmistakable, the kind that does not need words because it has years of agreement behind it. My father lowered his eyes to his plate, and somehow that hurt almost as much as Damon's voice. It is strange what you notice when someone tries to erase you in public. I noticed the chip on my water glass. I noticed the candlelight shaking against the wall. I noticed Damon's hand resting near the gray envelope like he already owned whatever was inside it. Everyone waited for me to fall apart. That had always been the role they understood for me. Jasmine absorbs. Jasmine stays quiet. Jasmine lets the family move on. But I did not cry. I did not beg. I did not defend myself. I looked at Damon and finally saw him clearly. He was not just my brother being cruel. He was a man trying to turn humiliation into proof that he deserved power. Then Grandpa's chair scraped against the floor. The sound was not loud, but it cut through the room like a blade. Grandpa stood slowly, one hand on the table, the other near his coffee cup. Damon's smile brightened for half a second because he thought Grandpa was rising to bless him. My mother sat straighter. My father closed his eyes. Grandpa looked at Damon first. You think she is not worthy of the family name? Damon gave a short laugh, nervous but still confident. I think someone had to say it. Grandpa nodded once. Then she'll carry mine, and everything that comes with it. Damon's face emptied. The color went out of him so quickly that several people noticed. His fingers tightened around the back of his chair. No, he whispered. Then louder. Grandpa, you can't do this to me. Grandpa's voice stayed calm. I did not do this to you. You brought me the truth and called it leadership. Damon shook his head. You don't understand. I was trying to protect what you built. No, Grandpa said. You were trying to sell what you did not earn. Grandpa turned to Mr. Bell, who opened the gray envelope and removed several documents. My mother's hand flew to her necklace. Dad, maybe this should be private. Grandpa did not look at her. He made his judgment of Jasmine public. The correction will be public too. Damon tried to laugh, but the sound came out thin. Grandpa picked up the first page. For 6 months, Damon has held meetings with Mercer Lane Development while implying he had authority from the Callaway Trust. He did not. The developer at the end of the table shifted. Damon's jaw tightened. Grandpa continued. He proposed selling the original workshop property, closing the apprenticeship floor, and using the Callaway name to market luxury housing. A murmur moved through the room. My mother whispered, "It was just an idea." Grandpa looked at her. An idea does not require a consulting fee? Damon's eyes widened. There it was. The part he thought nobody would say out loud. Grandpa lifted another page. The proposal includes a personal fee to Damon if the sale is completed. It also recommends reducing the apprenticeship fund into a scholarship display for publicity purposes. Luis looked away, his face hard with hurt. Grandpa saw him. Everyone did. Suddenly, the room was no longer only family, it was witnesses. It was community. It was consequence. Damon pointed at me. She did this. She poisoned you against me. Grandpa's expression did not change. Jasmine sent me facts. You sent me slogans. Grandpa turned another page. Her analysis showed legal risk, grant violations, flood zone complications, and damage to the community partnerships this family promised to protect. She did not ask for a title. She did not ask for money. She asked me to look at the truth before anyone signed away a responsibility. Damon's face twisted. She is a city employee. She doesn't know how business works. Grandpa's voice sharpened. She builds systems that keep people safe. You build speeches to sell what you never earned. The silence after that was almost physical. Damon looked around for rescue. My mother looked torn between panic and denial. My father still said nothing, but this time his silence did not protect Damon. It exposed him. Grandpa placed both hands on the table. Tonight, I was prepared to announce a transition plan for the Callaway Trust. Damon believed that plan would place him in an advisory role. After reviewing his actions and hearing his words, that will not happen. Damon stepped back like the floor had moved. Grandpa continued. Effective immediately, Damon has no authority to speak for Callaway Works, the Callaway Trust, or the Apprenticeship Foundation. Any agreement he suggested, implied or promised to Mercer Lane Development is void. Mr. Bell has already prepared notices. The developer stood quietly, buttoned his jacket, and left without shaking Damon's hand. That small action hit Damon harder than any insult could have. His future deal walked out of the room before his eyes. Grandpa looked at me then, and his face softened just enough to break something open in my chest. Jasmine, I am asking you to serve as chairwoman of the Apprenticeship Foundation and voting steward for the workshop property. If you choose to accept the Callaway name, I will support that legally and publicly. But whether you change your name or not, you have already carried its meaning better than anyone at this table tonight. I could not speak at first. My whole life, I had wanted someone in that family to say they saw me. Just me. Damon slammed his hand on the table. This is insane. You're giving everything to her because she made me look bad? Grandpa turned back to him. No. I am trusting her because you made yourself clear. My mother finally found her voice. Damon was upset. He didn't mean to hurt Jasmine. Grandpa looked at her. He did mean it. And you nodded. My mother's face crumpled, but Grandpa was not finished. He looked at my father. And you looked away. My father's shoulders sank. No one had ever named his silence so plainly. Damon was breathing hard now, his confidence cracking in front of everyone he had tried to impress. Grandpa picked up the final document and said, Damon, you owe your sister an apology. Damon stared at me. For 1 second I thought he might do it. Then pride won. He grabbed his jacket. You'll regret this, he said. Grandpa's reply was quiet. No, Damon. I would have regretted rewarding this. Damon walked out, but nobody followed him. Not immediately. Not this time. The door closed behind him, and the sound felt like the end of a lie our family had been telling for years. After Damon left, the room stayed silent in a way I had never heard before. It was not the silence of people avoiding conflict. It was the silence of people being forced to look at it. My mother half rose from her chair, probably to run after Damon the way she always did when consequences got too close, but Grandpa said her name once, and she stopped. Sit down, Marlene. For once, let him leave without teaching him that someone else will clean up what he breaks. My mother sat slowly, pale, her hands folded too tightly in her lap. My father finally looked at me, and the guilt in his eyes was almost harder to see than his silence had been. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, I knew Damon had spoken to developers. I didn't know it had gone that far. Grandpa looked at him and said, You knew enough to ask Jasmine not to make things uncomfortable. My father flinched. For years he had treated peace like the absence of raised voices, even when that peace required me to swallow disrespect so Damon could stay comfortable. That night, someone finally said the truth out loud. Silence can look gentle from the outside, but when it protects cruelty, it becomes a choice. Dinner did not continue. People stood in small groups, whispering, stunned by the collapse of the future Damon had advertised all evening. Mr. Bell spoke quietly with Grandpa. The developer was gone. The photographer Damon hired packed his camera without taking another picture. Luis approached me near the doorway, eyes shining, and said, Thank you. 2 words. That was all. But they meant more to me than every polished compliment my family had ever given Damon. Grandpa touched my arm and asked me to walk with him. We left the dining room through a side hallway that led to the old workshop floor behind the restaurant. One corner had been preserved with original tools, a workbench, and a faded sign that read, Callaway Works. Grandpa stood in front of it for a long moment. Under the softer lights, he looked less like the powerful man who had just ended Damon's fantasy, and more like the grandfather who had once taught me how to hold a wrench when I was 9. I did not choose you because Damon hurt you, he said. I chose you because when you saw something wrong, you protected the people who would have paid the price. I wiped my face then, not because I was broken, but because I had been holding myself together for so long I did not know how to stop. I told him I did not want the foundation to become a weapon against Damon. Grandpa smiled sadly and said, "That is exactly why you can be trusted with it." I accepted the role, but I made 3 conditions. The apprenticeship program had to stay open. A fixed part of Callaway Works' profits had to support students who could not afford tools, transportation, or certification fees. And no family member would have influence over the foundation unless they respected its purpose. Grandpa agreed before I even finished. A few months later, the paperwork became official. Damon lost the Mercer Lane deal, and without the Callaway name behind him, investors stopped returning his calls. He did not lose everything, but he lost the thing he valued most, the illusion that he was entitled to power because everyone had treated him like he was special. My mother tried to apologize in pieces at first, small messages, careful voicemails, sentences that began with, "I never meant," and ended before responsibility fully arrived. I did not rush to make her feel forgiven. My father wrote me a letter. It was awkward, late, and imperfect, but it was the first time he admitted that looking away had been easier than standing up for me. I kept that letter, not because it fixed the past, but because it proved he had finally stopped hiding from it. As for the Callaway name, I did not change mine right away. Maybe people expected me to grab it like a prize after being told I did not deserve it. But that was the lesson I learned. A name can open doors, but character decides whether you deserve to walk through them. I used the Callaway name for the new scholarship program instead. The first group of students received toolkits, transit passes, and paid placements with local maintenance crews. At the ceremony, Grandpa sat in the front row with tears in his eyes. Luis gave the welcome speech. My mother came quietly and sat near the back. Damon did not come. Maybe one day he will understand that losing power was not the worst thing that happened to him. The worst thing was realizing he had mistaken attention for respect and entitlement for worth. That night did not magically heal my family. Real healing does not work that way. But it gave me proof that I was never invisible. I had only been standing in a room where the wrong people refused to see me. The greatest lesson I carried from all of it is this: your value is not decided by the loudest voice in your family, by the parent who favors someone else, or by the person who uses your silence against you. True worth is built through responsibility, kindness, courage, and the way you protect people when there is nothing easy to gain. A healthy family should not teach children to compete for love. It should teach them to respect character, honesty, and service. And if your family forgets that, you are still allowed to remember who you are. I walked away from that dinner not as Damon's defeated little sister, not as the daughter everyone could overlook, but as Jasmine Reed, a woman who finally understood that dignity does not need permission. So tell me, if your own family tried to decide your worth for you, would you stay silent, walk away, or finally speak the truth?
My team and I are working hard behind the scenes to create scripts that are dramatic, meaningful, and worth your time. This story is completely fictional and created only for entertainment and educational purposes. We hope it leaves you with a message about courage, self respect, and the peace that comes from finally letting go.